A billionaire stepped forward and offered Pope Francis a gold watch, custom-made, worth more than some villages earn in a year. Cameras ready, guests watching. But what the Pope did next? It wasn't scripted, it wasn't polite. He refused, right there in front of Rome's elite. And what he said after handing the box back exposed everything wrong with how our world measures worth. Now, before we tell you the full story, hit that like button and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Let's get into it. The Vatican Gardens at sunset. Ancient walls wrapped in ivy, marble saints watching from shadows, the air itself carrying whispers of centuries past. This is where Gregory Langston stood, perfectly poised in his custom-tailored navy suit that probably cost more than what most people make in a month. The kind of suit that doesn't wrinkle, doesn't fade, doesn't give away anything about the man inside it. He wasn't alone. Around him, a hand-selected gathering of the world's elite, philanthropists with practiced smiles, diplomats with calculated handshakes, billionaires who rarely heard the word no. All of them waiting, watching as Gregory reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This," he announced, his voice carrying just the right note of rehearsed humility, "is a gift, crafted exclusively for your holiness." The crowd fell silent. Even the evening breeze seemed to pause. Pope Francis, who had just finished speaking to a young nun in a simple habit, turned toward Gregory. Those eyes, those quiet, searching eyes that had a way of making even world leaders forget their carefully crafted speeches. Gregory didn't flinch. He was ready for his moment. The Pope accepted the box without opening it. He looked down, then back up at Gregory. His expression never changed. "Thank you for your intention," Francis said, voice gentle as rain, "but I must kindly refuse." The silence that followed wasn't just uncomfortable, it was seismic. Gregory blinked once, twice, like a computer trying to process an error message. Around them, the ambient sounds of the garden, the soft pluck of a harp, the distant murmur of fountain water, suddenly felt deafening. Francis didn't raise his voice, didn't lecture, didn't make a scene. He simply handed the box back and said, "Some gifts do not fit the wrist that must carry them." Then he turned away to greet a young seminarian who had arrived with a message. Gregory stood frozen, the unopened box heavy in his hands. A few guests exchanged looks, confused, awkward, maybe even a little satisfied. One man whispered something about authenticity. A woman near the fountain crossed herself quietly. It was supposed to be a moment, photographed, quoted, remembered. Instead, it became something no one expected. So what exactly was inside that box, and why would the Pope of the Catholic Church refuse a gift so valuable it could feed entire villages for months? To understand that, we need to go back 24 hours, to the moment. Gregory Langston's private jet touched down in Rome. Gregory Langston didn't believe in religion. He believed in leverage. At 54, he sat at the top of one of the world's most aggressive tech empires, a global infrastructure platform that touched everything from server farms to smart cities. His name rarely made headlines, and that's exactly how he wanted it. The real power, he knew, moved in silence. His signature was on billion-dollar deals that shaped the digital landscape of entire countries. In his world, influence wasn't requested. It was packaged, negotiated, and executed. So when the Vatican extended a private invitation to an elite circle of donors and global figures, an initiative to promote interfaith cooperation through humanitarian partnerships, Gregory said yes, not because of faith, but because the Church still held soft power over millions, and soft power, when shaped correctly, was good for business. On the flight to Rome, his assistant handed him a velvet box. "The watch is ready, sir." Gregory opened it slowly, savoring the moment. Inside, nestled on cream suede, lay a timepiece so rare only two had ever been made. pure 18K gold, hand-finished in Geneva, with a skeleton dial revealing the inner mechanisms that ticked with obsessive precision. On the underside, one phrase, engraved in Latin, Tempus Dei non est vendidum. Time of God is not for sale. The irony wasn't lost on him, it was part of the appeal. A spiritual gift, he mused aloud, half smirking. Elegant, symbolic, appropriate. It's insured for $185,000, his assistant offered, as if reciting another item on a checklist. Gregory's lips curled into a smile. Still cheaper than a press campaign. But beneath the sarcasm, beneath that polished exterior, there was something else, not insecurity, not quite, but a hunger to be acknowledged by institutions older and grander than his own. As a boy raised in the grey suburbs of Manchester, he had stared at cathedrals, not with reverence, but with a yearning to own what they represented. Legacy, permanence, power, dressed in stone. If he could place that gold watch on the Pope's wrist, even briefly, it would be more than a PR win. It would be validation. The world's most humble man accepting a symbol from the world's most strategic. In Gregory's mind, it was already done. The box was ready. The media would be briefed. He had even drafted a caption in advance. A gift of time, from one servant of the world to another. He never imagined that the man who had inspired millions by rejecting status would reject him too. The Vatican gardens were unlike anything Gregory had ever seen. Centuries of curated silence, woven into every vine, every column, every cobbled pathway. The reception was scheduled just before sunset, when the Roman light turned golden and shadows stretched like prayers across ancient stone. It wasn't a large crowd, perhaps 30 guests in total. The invitation-only group included foreign ministers, heads of non-profit alliances, select CEOs, and a few artists whose work had recently supported Vatican charities. Gregory was among the last to arrive, stepping from his black car with precision timing, just as the photographers put away their cameras and the Pope's aides began murmuring that His Holiness is on his way. Gregory wasn't concerned with missing the opening remarks. His purpose was timed to a single moment, the gifting. The guests mingled over small plates of fruit, bread, and wine in crystal glasses. Conversations floated through the air, talk of refugee programs, interreligious dialogue, climate agreements. Gregory listened with half-interest, nodding at familiar names. His eyes stayed fixed on the velvet box inside his jacket, its weight, more symbolic than physical. A woman beside him was talking softly to a young priest. "Do you think he'll speak to each of us?" "If there's time, yes," the priest answered. "He tends to notice the ones not trying to be noticed." Gregory turned away. At 7:18 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. No announcement, no trumpet, no fanfare, just a wave of attention turning toward the inner corridor. Pope Francis entered, wearing a simple white cassock and his signature-worn black shoes. The shoes that had made headlines when he first became Pope, not expensive, not red, not ceremonial. Just ordinary shoes for a man who refused to be ordinary. He walked slowly but purposefully, his steps unhurried, as if the weight of centuries walked with him but didn't burden him. People greeted him with reverence. Some bowed, others took his hand. He spoke softly, listened more than he spoke. He asked questions, he remembered names. Gregory watched it all unfold with careful detachment. He plays the part well, he thought, the humble shepherd among wolves in suits. Still, he was impressed by the effect. The man had gravity. When the Pope approached the far end of the reception, Gregory positioned himself near a small fountain beneath a stone angel. He rehearsed the lines in his head. This was the moment. The Pope drew closer, speaking now with a cardinal and a refugee activist. Gregory stepped forward as they finished. "Your Holiness," he said, offering a respectful bow. May I offer you a gift of time?" The Pope turned to face him, eyes warm and patient. Gregory opened the box with a subtle flourish. The watch gleamed like captured sunlight, its gold case glinting under the garden lights. A few guests glanced over. A cardinal nearby tilted his head curiously. Francis looked down at the watch. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with hands both gentle and firm, he closed the box. "Thank you for your intention," he said quietly. "But I must kindly refuse." Gregory froze. I had this made for you, personally." The Pope's eyes didn't harden. They didn't judge. But they did look through him, as if searching for something beyond the words. "Some gifts," Francis replied, "are too heavy for what they're meant to measure." Then he turned, graciously, gently, and continued his walk through the reception. Gregory remained rooted in place, the unopened box still in his hands. Around him, silence stretched wide. A champagne flute clinked awkwardly in the distance. The woman from earlier gave him a glance that wasn't quite pity, but wasn't admiration either. It was supposed to be a moment of elegance. Instead, it was a mirror. And for the first time in a long time, Gregory didn't like what he saw in it. Gregory didn't move for several seconds. The velvet box felt heavier now, as if it no longer held a timepiece, but a lesson he hadn't asked for. Around him, conversations had resumed in careful undertones, like waves returning after a sudden stillness. But the echo of the Pope's refusal clung to the corners of the courtyard, like incense smoke. He turned, slowly, and walked back toward the edge of the garden, where a marble bench overlooked a row of olive trees. He sat, the watch still clutched in one hand. A few guests threw him polite glances, but no one approached. No one knew what to say to the man who had just been quietly and publicly declined by the Pope of the Catholic Church. Jameson Burke, a shipping magnate from Toronto, slid beside him. "Well," he said, after a long pause, "that was unexpected." Gregory forced a thin smile. "Was it?" he muttered. "I thought I had him figured out." Jameson gave a short laugh. "Nobody figures out Francis. You either listen to him or you miss it entirely." Gregory didn't respond. He was still running the moment back in his head, Francis's eyes, calm but unwavering. The phrase, "too heavy for what they're meant to measure," it didn't sound like a rejection of him. And yet it hit like one. He stood again, instinctively scanning the crowd until he saw Francis further down the walkway, now speaking with a young woman in a wheelchair. She was smiling. He was listening. Without thinking, Gregory began to walk toward them. A security aide shifted but made no move to stop him. When he reached them, he paused, respectful but firm. "Your Holiness," he said again, voice lower this time. "I meant no offense." Francis turned, patient as ever. "I did not take offense." Gregory nodded. "Then why?" "I don't understand. It was meant as a gesture." Francis looked at him closely. "Then perhaps the gesture was meant more for you than for me." Gregory blinked. Francis gestured gently toward the box, still in Gregory's hand. "May I ask, why a watch?" Gregory hesitated. "Time," he said. "I thought it symbolized time, respect, legacy." Francis tilted his head. "Then let us talk about time." He gestured toward a low stone bench beneath a pergola. Gregory hesitated, then followed. They sat. Guests nearby politely gave them space, though a few couldn't help but steal glances. Francis folded his hands. "Many years ago, when I was a parish priest in Buenos Aires, a boy named Raphael gave me a gift, a broken watch. Its hands were rusted, its glass cracked. He found it in a garbage heap." Gregory raised an eyebrow. Francis continued. "He told me it was to remind me that for many people time does not tick forward. It grinds, it delays, it breaks down. His father was in prison. His mother cleaned floors. Raphael had no schedule to keep, no reason to rush, but he wanted me to have something that reminded me to slow down and notice people like him. Gregory looked down at the pristine box in his lap. I wore that watch until it disintegrated, Francis said. Not for fashion, not for status, but because every time I looked at it, I remembered Raphael's hands placing it into mine, nervous but proud. He looked at Gregory now, not unkindly. A gift is not about value, it's about presence, about what it carries. I do not wear symbols of what the world honors. I wear reminders of the world it forgets. Gregory exhaled quietly. The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic, but they cracked something open inside him, something he'd armored over with strategy and elegance. I wasn't trying to impress you, Gregory said after a pause. I just thought it would mean something. It does, the Pope replied, rising gently. It means we still believe symbols can speak, but we must be careful which language they speak in. And with that, he offered a kind smile and returned to his guests. Gregory remained seated, the gold watch still unopened in his hands. Only now, he wasn't sure if it told time, or just revealed how much of it he'd spent measuring the wrong things. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, Gregory Langston remained seated beneath the pergola. The velvet box lay unopened beside him now, like a monument to everything that hadn't gone as planned. Around him, the lights of the Vatican gardens dimmed gradually. Somewhere inside, a choir was rehearsing, soft voices rising like prayers. Through the open air, a rustle of footsteps approached. It wasn't security, it was Pope Francis again. No ceremony, no cameras, just a man in white walking softly toward a man in a suit who had begun to understand the limits of both money and pride. I thought you'd gone, Gregory said. I often find the silence at night more honest than the noise of the day, the Pope replied, lowering himself gently onto the bench beside him. Gregory chuckled bitterly. You always speak in riddles? Only when plain words fail, Francis said, smiling. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then the Pope glanced at the velvet box. May I tell you something I've never shared publicly? He asked. Gregory nodded. Please. Francis looked straight ahead as he began. When I was elected Pope, one of the first gifts I received was a pair of red papal shoes. Tradition, handmade, embroidered, beautiful. They arrived in a velvet case like yours. He paused. The craftsman had traveled from Milan to deliver them himself. He wept when he placed them in my hands. And did you wear them? Gregory asked. No, Francis said quietly. I thanked him, but I placed them in a display case. I still wear the same black shoes I brought with me from Buenos Aires, not because they're better, but because of the story behind them. He leaned back slightly. They were made by a man named Lorenzo. He ran a small repair shop next to a bakery. When he learned I was moving to Rome, he told me, wear these in the Vatican, so that every step you take reminds you of where you came from. His hands shook as he handed them to me. I could tell they were the finest shoes he'd ever made. Gregory listened, absorbing every word. Those shoes are scuffed, stitched by hand, nothing special to the eye, but they remind me that I walk not for myself, but for those who will never walk these marble halls. Francis turned to face him. You understand legacy, Mr. Langston. You've built it, but legacy without humility becomes spectacle. It becomes a brand, an empire, an echo chamber. Gregory said nothing. He didn't need to. The words found their way in. When I held your gift today, Francis continued, I didn't see a watch. I saw a mirror. Not of you, personally, but of a world that confuses beauty with meaning, luxury with reverence, value with cost. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on his knees. Your watch is beautiful, truly, but I could not wear it. Because every time I looked at it, I would think of those who sell their time for coins, who work 2 jobs to feed a child, who wait in hospitals counting hours they can't afford to waste. Francis looked at him then, really looked. I don't reject gifts. I reject what they represent when they drown out the stories I'm meant to carry. Gregory's voice cracked, just slightly. Why not just say that? At the time, the Pope gave a small smile. Sometimes truth must be unwrapped slowly, like a gift. Silence settled again. The choir's voices faded in the distance. Gregory finally picked up the box and opened it, not as a gesture but as a question. The gold glinted under the garden lights. Its perfection now seemed sterile, like something made not to tell time, but to pretend it could control it. I spent 3 months designing this, Gregory said. Every detail, every mechanism. I know, Francis replied. That's why I came back to speak with you. Gregory turned toward him, confused. Because your gift was not cheap, Francis said. And when something is made with such care, even if misguided, it deserves to be answered with care. He gestured toward the watch. Do you know what timepiece I still carry today? Gregory shook his head. Francis reached into the pocket of his cassock and pulled out a small, battered wristwatch. Its strap was cracked, the glass slightly fogged. The seconds hand stuttered faintly. This, he said, holding it out, given to me by Raphael's older brother, Matteo, when he left Buenos Aires for a job in Chile. He said, I want you to have this, because time moves differently when people are waiting for you to come home. He placed it back in his pocket with care. It keeps imperfect time, but it keeps perfect meaning. Gregory looked at his own gift one last time. Then, slowly, he closed the box and set it down on the bench between them. What should I do with it? He asked. That, the Pope said, rising gently, is the beginning of a better question. He patted Gregory's shoulder. Good night, Mr. Langston. Gregory remained seated as Francis walked away, this time not toward the guests, not toward photographers, or aides, just toward the garden's far end, where an open gate led back into the Vatican's quiet interior. The billionaire didn't move for several minutes. He stared at the velvet box, then at the cracked stone beneath his polished shoes. He had arrived expecting validation. He was leaving with something far more valuable: perspective. The following morning, Gregory Langston sat alone in his hotel suite, 20 floors above the cobbled streets of Rome, where scooters zipped past basilicas and market stalls sprang to life like clockwork. The view was spectacular, but he wasn't looking at it. The gold watch sat on the desk in front of him, open in its box. No press release had been sent. No photos had been shared. What was meant to be a headline had become a footnote, one only he would remember. He hadn't slept much. Not because of shame, not entirely, but because for the first time in years he couldn't stop thinking about a story that wasn't his. A shoemaker in Buenos Aires, a boy named Raphael, a brother named Matteo, people he had never met, whose names now lived rent-free in the mind of one of the world's most powerful businessmen. Gregory picked up the watch and turned it in his hands. Every edge was perfect, every line intentional. But he couldn't stop picturing the Pope's cracked, stuttering watch, how it had ticked like a quiet rebellion against everything this one represented. A knock at the door. It was his assistant. The car's ready. Investors are expecting you at the forum. Gregory nodded vaguely. I'm not going. She hesitated. Should I cancel the panel? Tell them I lost track of time, he said, almost smiling. She didn't get the joke. She left quietly. A few hours later, Gregory wandered through the outskirts of Vatican City alone, hands in his pockets, sunglasses hiding eyes that had not yet hardened for the day. Tourists buzzed around him, snapping selfies, sipping espresso. He moved through them like a ghost. Near the colonnade, he noticed a man in a municipal uniform, early 60s, sweeping leaves into a bin beside a marble bench. His shoes were cracked, his wristwatch was ancient and barely clinging to its strap, but he was whistling. Cheerfully, Gregory approached. "Buongiorno," he said. The man looked up, slightly surprised, and smiled. "Buongiorno, signore," without another word. Gregory reached into his bag and pulled out the velvet box. He offered it with both hands, no flourish, no speech. The man opened it and blinked in confusion. "Per me," Gregory nodded. "For time," he said, "and for the stories we wear." The man didn't seem to understand, but he accepted the gift with visible gratitude. "Grazie," he whispered. Gregory didn't wait. He turned and walked away, lighter somehow. For the first time, the weight of gold no longer followed him, and for the first time he felt like something had finally been let go. Gregory Langston stood at the edge of St. Peter's Square, his carry-on slung over one shoulder, his tailored coat open to the breeze that drifted in from the Tiber. His flight back to London was in 3 hours. The driver had been waiting for 20 minutes, but still he stood there. Around him the square buzzed with life, pilgrims clutching rosaries, tourists snapping photos of the basilica's grandeur, children chasing pigeons across centuries-old stone. To most, it was just another holy landmark. To Gregory, it was now a reminder that not all sacred things come gilded in gold. He shifted his gaze toward the basilica's dome, remembering something Pope Francis had said the night before. Legacy, without humility, becomes spectacle. And for the first time, Gregory felt no need to defend himself against it. He wasn't here to argue anymore. He was here to understand. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Jameson. "We missed you at the morning round table. Hope the Pope didn't scare you off." Gregory smiled faintly and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He started walking again, not toward the car, but into the colonnade. The light filtered down in columns, warm and soft. At the far end, he spotted Sister Elena, one of the Vatican liaisons who had helped organize the reception. She turned when she saw him. "Mr. Langston," she greeted warmly. "We didn't expect to see you again this morning." "I didn't expect to be here either," Gregory said honestly, "but I wanted to ask, is it open?" She tilted her head. "The basilica. I'd like to go inside." "Of course," she nodded, her smile unchanged. "You won't need a guide." The inside of St. Peter's took his breath for reasons he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the scale or the marble or the frescoes that danced above his head. It was the silence, not emptiness, but presence. The kind of stillness that made you realize how much noise you'd carried inside you. He didn't kneel. He didn't cross himself. He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. But he did sit on a bench along the right aisle, near a statue of Saint Joseph holding the infant Christ. Gregory sat for what might have been minutes or an hour. Time didn't tick the same way in here. He noticed a group of nuns praying a few rows ahead. A man in a janitor's uniform lighting a candle with care. A child whispering to her mother about Jesus in the clouds. There was no luxury here. And yet, it felt richer than anything he'd built. After a long while, he stood again, feeling, if not changed, then softened, like something had loosened inside, no longer clenched so tightly. As he stepped back into the square, the sun was climbing. Higher, the world looked no different, but he did, not in his clothes, not in his stature, in the way he noticed. A child's frayed shoelaces, a tourist helping his elderly mother navigate a cobblestone ramp, the simple rhythm of life unfolding in real time without a single camera aimed at it. The car pulled up beside him. The driver opened the door. Gregory hesitated, then turned for one last glance at the Vatican behind him. He didn't know what he believed, but he knew now. Some truths don't need belief to leave a mark. He ducked into the car, pulled the door shut, and watched the colonnades disappear behind tinted glass. No press conferences, no headlines, no post about impactful moments or humbled by greatness, just silence, and for once he let it be enough. What would you have done in Pope Francis's place? Would you have accepted the gold watch or gently turned it away like he did, let us know in the comments. We read every single one. If this story made you pause and reflect, even just for a moment, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, with the bell icon turned on so you never miss another upload. And if you know someone who puts too much weight on wealth, status, or what they wear on their wrist, share this video with them. Not to shame them, but to remind them of what truly holds value. Our other stories should be appearing on your screen now. Tap one to keep watching. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time with another story inspired by the legacy of Pope Francis.